Welcome to Hello Chaos, the show where founders, innovators, and chaotic minds get real and unfiltered about the mess, the magic, and the mayhem of entrepreneurship. I'm JJ, your host and fellow work in progress. And today we have Steve Cinelli, chairman and founder of Renaissance Park Corporation, and calling out, believe, of San Francisco, California. Welcome, Steve. Welcome to the chaos.
Hi, JJ. Have a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And you are calling out of San Francisco, right? Or are you on
Yes, that's
vacation
correct.
somewhere, traveling the world?
No. I wish I was on holiday, but I'm in the office.
I love it. My brother's right outside of San Francisco. He lives in Alameda.
Oh, super. Yeah,
So
across the
he's
bay.
not across the bay. I love that area. It's so pretty. But just start us out. Tell us about your journey as a founder. I know you've done a lot of things as an entrepreneur, founded many things. So just tell us a little bit about your journey and how did Renaissance Park Corporation come about?
Could you repeat that? The connection's sort of choppy.
Oh yeah. I was just saying, just start. You've done a lot of things in the entrepreneurial space. Tell us about the journey and what really inspired, what led to founding Renaissance Park Corporation.
Well, I think I made most of your question up. Um, well, I'm a banker by background, a second generation banker. And so I grew up the ranks of a major financial institution, was a bank examiner for a period, a regulator. Uh, and then I moved into the leveraged buyout space, was a partner with a private equity firm. And so that was a great ride. And then I guess commencing a founder's journey is way back when, this is 20 some years ago. I co-founded and launched the first of the online capital raising platforms for private companies to raise capital from a network of accredited investors, well-to-dos. Wow. And this actually was the genesis, the preamble to the crowdfunding movement, to the peer-to-peer lending movement. We were the ones that actually worked with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, FINRA, to say, yes, we can do this. They initially balked at it, saying you can't use the internet to basically raise money online. We said, not only can we can actually improve the process because we can standardize things. We know what people are reading, what they're comprehending.
Wow.
We had engagement to where I believe we actually improved their investing behaviors and their practices. I designed the technology platform, the user experience and whatnot, and then I ran the banking group. I had about 25 bankers working for me.
Wow.
And we could raise 10 to $15 million for a company in about a week. Highly efficient capital formation. It's a great use of technology as applied to financial services. I've actually written a couple books on the same matter. So that was the sort of the commencement of the founder journey. As it was two of us to start with. We got it up to about 400 people. We raised about $100 million of venture money. The company was eventually sold, and then I maintained my interest in all things sort of fintech. I was a founding board member of a couple of the crowdfunding trade associations, some payment and remittance companies. Was actually, and this will segue into Renaissance, is I got approached by some of the government officials in the state of California to put together a banking system for the cannabis trade. Because as you may know, even though you have 40 odd states having some sort of legality for cannabis, for marijuana, because of the federal illegality, the banks really don't support the industry. And so you have an industry that's multi-billions of dollars of commerce. However, there's no banking system to support it. And so we designed and put together a sort of off-grid banking system to facilitate payments and remittances and capital and so on and so forth. That experience led me to an introduction of industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is the non-psychotropic strain of the cannabis plant, and it became legal under the Farm Bill of 2018.
Right.
Uh, so I was one of 4 or 5 of us decided to grow some hemp just to see what that was an experience. And 2 takeaways from that experience, one of which was we weren't meant to be the farmers because it was a bust. But secondarily, as a research junkie, I became enamored and just amazed at all the different use cases for industrial hemp,
Yeah.
from textiles to foods to biocomposites to building materials to all sorts of different things. And unfortunately, hemp was rolled under the bus in the 1930s under the Marijuana Tax Act of, I think, 1937 or
Okay.
34. And, corporate interest had a vested interest in putting hemp, under, basically rolling it under the bus.
Right.
You had the DuPont family introducing nylon as a synthetic, polymer, synthetic thread. There was the Rockefeller family that supported. They were the first to support the pharmaceutical industry because a lot of the pharma products are petroleum based, and they didn't want homeopathic or natural ingredients to compete
Right.
with what they were doing on a pharmaceutical standpoint. And then you had the William Randolph Hearst contingent, who had the big publishing empire, and they owned a tremendous number of tree stands, forests and whatnot. And so they wanted to use their own wood for the paper and the pulp rather than using hemp. And hemp, of course, was used in the early drafts of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and it was competitive to what the Hearst family was doing. So through corporate collusion, for the most part,
Right.
got tossed under the bus, even though you had all these uses. So anyway, we rolled forward to the current day. 2018 rolled around. The Farm Bill allowed for the cultivation and the usage of industrial hemp. And so when I saw all the use cases and the fact that we had this legal hiatus for 90 years, I thought maybe there's something that can be done. You had a number of cottage-sized companies show up, doing a hemp T-shirt, hemp, for this and that. But the industry, because of its absence in commerce for many, many decades, it seemed to me that we had the opportunity not only to build a company around hemp, but really build an industry. And that's really how I frame Renaissance Park, is that it's not about building a company that deals with competition. It's rather building an industry to support everybody else,
Right.
and pursue collaboration.
So
The
like
view
lifting
is
up the category of what's
absolutely,
possible.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, because the industry is not that big to where you're really dealing with competitive threats. It's really, how, sort of what's the adage, rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
And that's really the philosophy here, is let's elevate everyone in not only the hemp space. I took it one step further, and it's not only about hemp as a plant material, but we start looking at other fiber plants, from
Right.
rice to sorghum to wheat to flax. And the use cases for all these fiber plants are pretty amazing. I do some stuff over in Italy, and Italy is actually one of the biggest producers of rice. In fact, it's the biggest exporter of rice into the EU.
Really?
And
Huh.
rice
Okay.
straw, which is the waste material, just to give you an example, the waste material is normally either burned, which again gives off, greenhouse gases, or it's flooded to decompose it, which uses a lot of water. Well, there's some really interesting escapades going on, in the Middle East, as well as, there's a facility in California we're looking at that actually will take that rice straw, rather than burn it, rather than flood it, is actually pulverize the straw, mix it with a resin to create medium density fiber boards for the construction industry as well as the furniture industry. So all of a sudden you're taking this ag waste
Right.
and actually finding a productive purpose. And you find that with so many different plants. There hasn't been a lot of enough material science research to say, we can really use plant-based or nature-based solutions
Right.
to address some of the challenges, and that's where the opportunity,
The
in
re-
my view, lies. And just as a little quip, is a lot of folks, when we start talking about hemp, saying, "Oh, it's green. It's stand up a green flag. You're environmentalist, this and that," which is true. It's certainly one of the messages that we want to provide. It's environmentally sound. It's
right.
it contributes to the sort of environmental circularity. But what I found is these plant-based ingredients with the right research actually perform better than the synthetic polymers.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that's really interesting is, for example, probably 80% of the threads that you're wearing right now are, you know, of a petroleum base,
Oh,
whether it's nylon, acrylic, polyester.
absolutely. Yeah.
And, and that's one of the things that comes up is, if you look at landfills, about 15% of landfills are textiles because they don't biodegrade because of the
Right.
constitution of the fabrics. Well, you look at hemp, yeah, hemp's biodegradable, but what you take one step further is that the threads of a hemp, um, uh, you know, textile or a piece of apparel, like this is a hemp with nettle sweater
Yeah.
that came in from Germany, and which is great, is that you find out that hemp actually has a vibration to it, and it actually helps the circulatory system of the body when you wear hemp or you sleep in hemp linens or whatever. So there's some physiological aspects and functionality that really hasn't been
I've been talked
stated or
about.
introduced or marketed. So that's the fun part of this
Yeah.
endeavor is really understanding the natural benefits. And again, it's not just the environmental things. It's actually the functionality that actually performs better than other types of synthetic material.
On all multiple levels there. So
Mhm.
I have a few. I want to go back
Sure.
to the crowdfunding, your financial kind of foray into
Right.
foundership. Where do you see? I mean, you kind of created a category back then that didn't exist in terms of creating the platform, the infrastructure for, um, banking or investing at a larger scale for startups and investments. How have you seen that industry evolve, whether it's evolve backwards or progressing forward? Like, what's changed for you there when you look at it now, in a 2020, rearview mirror? Just like,
Sure. No, it's a very poignant question. I would say the observations I have is what we developed back in 2000. I would still say is the best example of an online capital market system. We did things, but we didn't have the benefit of Skype or Teams or Google Meet
right.
or other mechanisms. We had a TV studio we used. We did live webcasts with the management teams. I interviewed the management teams live, so folks online could actually listen to the dialogue, the interview. They could pose questions directly, and so it was very iterative. In a lot of respects, they sort of called what we did a financial entertainment. Is
Yeah.
that you engage the audience. Certainly, you're presenting an opportunity, an investment opportunity to a group of investors, but you want to engage them. I think what I've seen over the course of, well, let me take a step back. I think it's in 2011, 2012, the Jobs Act passed, which allowed for regulation crowdfunding to take place. So there was some structure put in. But the thing that I reflect on is of the hundreds of platforms that are out there, my curiosity is, with the exception of one, maybe two, none of these platforms have been acquired by a strategic buyer, which suggests to me, where's the strategic benefit of doing what they're doing? The numbers that they produce do not put them as a candidate for an initial public offering. So you're really looking at, okay, who's the strategic buyers? And there's a lot of capital that's gone into developing these platforms,
Yeah.
but there's no exit. And that's the problem. And, one of the things I looked at is that Goldman Sachs, who most people know, they wanted to get into the peer-to-peer lending space, a number of years ago. They saw how technology can effectuate the intermediation on a very efficient basis, linking, users of capital with providers of capital. And Goldman had the ability to buy, any one of the bigger peer-to-peer lending platforms like Lending Club, which is public,
Right.
or Prosper, which is sort of the second largest. But rather than them strategically buying either of those platforms, which they certainly could have, they decided to go it alone, and they developed their Marcus platform, new technology.
Right.
And so that really was telling to me, is that it doesn't take that much to put these platforms together if you know what you're doing.
Right.
But then you ask, okay, what is the secret sauce? What is your IP? What's the intellectual property that you're really creating?
Right.
And for the most part, it's a online deal shop.
Right.
And so these platforms, they generate revenues by getting deals done. I think their batting average in terms of how many deals they tee up to the number that they actually get done is probably in the high teens. So the batting average is so, and it's it's eat what you kill,
Right.
and that's how they generate revenues. The challenge, and this is where I think that the crowdfunding industry has to rethink their approach to the use of technology, the engagement they have with the investors, how they structure their product. I think there's a tremendous amount still to be learned. And again, not to toot our own horn, but I still think some of the functionality and the feature set that we did back in 2000 would blow the socks off of any platform that currently exists right now. So, but
you can do that within the Renaissance Park, but for that industry.
Well, actually, that's a great point. One of our initiatives is putting together a platform that enables companies that comport with our thesis in terms of using nature-based solutions, nature-based substances to replace and displace toxic ingredients. And if they need growth capital, we want to make that available to them. And I do think that a lot of the products that may be spawned by these companies in the hemp space are typically consumer packaged goods, consumer products.
Right.
Is strategically, I think crowdfunding is compelling because you're bringing investors to the table, but those investors also represent your consumers.
Right.
And you can have a hybrid relationship in terms of capital provision as well as patronage.
Right.
And so that's where I think there's a really big opportunity, but very few, I could probably count on one hand, that have sort of melded the two functions together and actually make a compelling proposition
right.
For the betterment of not only the investor community, but the companies looking to raise money. And so there's some next generation things that
absolutely
really
have
to be.
We hear in kind of the innovation ecosystem, there's a lot of talk around, and I'm on the East Coast, so we, big, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, biotech, fintech, life science kind of technology. And it's interesting, we've been hearing, I think Chandler, his producer, we've been hearing hemp and as that, part of the ag industry kind of, there's I don't think that people have really dove into the opportunity of the inventions, the innovations that can happen by whether it's in the byproducts that, like you said, the circularity, because those conversations are happening in manufacturing of we can help with the circularity of with new products, but nobody's talking about it within the hemp and ag space. We hear it a lot.
Oh,
Like,
I think,
eh,
yeah, I think there is conversations going on. There's a
okay,
dialogue going on, but there's no megaphone. That's the
yeah,
challenge.
yeah,
It's more of an echo chamber in terms of those in the hemp space are talking amongst themselves. But we have to really break out in a broader discourse the benefits of not only hemp but other fiber plants in the use of building materials
right,
instead of concrete, which is requires a lot of energy to produce, oil based. Well, you
right,
have things like hempcrete, which is a blend of the hemp hurd, which is a woody part of the hemp plant, and a mixture of a lime binder, and it actually is insulative. It's fire retardant, which is a big thing, particularly for someone in California with the fires
right.
and stuff. Uh, it sequesters carbon, it clears the air. There's a lot of things that just have to be elevated, and in fact, hempcrete, interestingly, just was approved by uh, the construction, some of the construction standards boards for use. And so I think we'll see over the course of time the use of hemp and other plant-based substances increase. In fact, one of the observations I've had is, Europe and certainly Asia are 10 to 15 years ahead of us
Yeah,
in terms of the use of plant-based materials. Uh, they're building homes. They're certainly textiles is a big thing,
yeah,
but there's a couple companies in Germany that actually are using hemp uh, to create molded fiber packaging. So it's fully 100% biodegradable, compostable. Uh, it doesn't leach, plastic
right.
into the waterways and this and that. So there's a
Or into
lot
our
of
foods. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of new science
Hmm.
coming up. But because of, if you just in retrospect, if you think about hemp that was again rolled under the bus in the 1930s, is it because of its illegal status? Is you really didn't have government, you didn't have
Right,
academia doing research on it, and now just over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, now you have some pretty sophisticated scientists and biologists and agronomists and material scientists actually putting pen to paper and coming up with really interesting studies and the applicability of plant-based substances, which again my view is that they actually perform better than
right.
the synthetics. But there's got to be a message, and there's got to be a really a movement
Yeah.
to say let's go. It's almost like go back to the future, because
That's
if you think about the founding of the U.S., virtually every single founding father grew hemp. They grew it for textiles. They grew it for rope. They grew it for sails. For food,
right.
and
And it was paper
as I said,
product and all that. I mean, that was, yeah.
exactly. So
What?
there's a huge opportunity. It's just you got to apply uh, the right know-how and get
Right.
a
Well,
movement
just,
going.
yeah. And, dreamers, of who wants to take like, there's opportunity there, for people to start kind of crafting some new innovations, into that space. What
Mhm.
do you think was, with all your journeys and with especially with is the category or the, like you said, not having the megaphone, is that the biggest challenge that you guys face, or was there another challenge that did you hit a wall, that you had to overcome, or are you facing it
on,
right now
the,
with
on
the?
the on the hemp side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you have is an industry that was dormant for literally decades because of its illegality, as I mentioned. And so, yes, it's growing, but it's got to be reintroduced. And a lot of, when the Farm Bill of 2018 passed, a lot of folks, including ourselves, jumped into growing hemp because, CBD,
Right.
as a nutraceutical or a supplement was very much in favor. And so all of a sudden, the United States went from something like 20,000 acres of planted hemp to 800,000 acres. It was overgrown, oversupplied, and the farmers just said, "Screw this!"
Mm,
We're not. We had aspirations of making a lot of money on this crop. Well, now it's not because it's oversupplied,
mm,
and so the supply chain has been one of the mantras within this industry.
mm,
I I'm counterintuitive here. I don't believe it's supply chain. I think the supply chain will come. What we have to do, and this is the mission, one of the missions of Renaissance, is really focus on the demand side.
mm.
We have to create products. We have to introduce products that use plant-based substances such as hemp, such as flax, and this and that, and show the consumer that you actually get a better product by using these materials. And then, oops, excuse me.
No worries.
And then you can back into the supply chain.
Mm,
You don't have infrastructure in this industry. There
yeah.
are those that have set up manufacturing facilities, but you know they may be operating at 20%, 30% of capacity because
Mm,
there's just not enough demand as of yet. And so it's really the sort of the renaissance, and I name this thing renaissance because it's
mm.
rebirthing an old, an old product, an old,
Right.
staple. And our focus is really let's
Mm,
create the demand for, food products, for textiles, for building materials, this and that. Prove that they work. Prove that there is a buyer
right.
for the end product, and then we can back into and address the supply side. But right now, I think the industry has sort of been, prematurely moved in the direction of supply chain matters, and I think that was misguided.
Hmm.
And so we're taking a different approach.
Yeah. If you had to hit rewind on anything, would you do something differently?
There's always sort of 2020 hindsight.
Right.
We're in the process of closing a big round of financing
Mm,
right now. May have approached how we finance this thing a little differently, but we've got a pretty significant backer that's committed quite a bit of capital, and I think we'll be in sort of this unique position of having the deep pocket in the industry.
mm,
Uh, and so it's taking some time to do that. Would I do things differently? This is it's funny because
mm.
you asked about uh, words that I would number one describe my entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
and I'll
Yeah. Tell me what
I'll
word comes
steal,
up.
I will steal this from your studio. It's chaos. You
That is
I
a
think
word that comes up often.
yeah. So it's well, let's say controlled chaos.
There you go.
So I'll do that, and then what am I trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
And this goes back to uh, the term that I sort of regularly use is I see Renaissance as a legacy.
Mm,
This is we want to make some money. We want to do some good for the community. We want to support the rural communities. We want to create better products. So it's really a legacy. This is a long-term thing. Uh, this is not this is not something that we build it and one year we flip it to something else.
right.
This is we can do some really uh, productive, compassionate, substantive
Mm,
work and create a lot of contributions across socioeconomic areas,
mm,
environmental issues, so on and so forth.
right.
So I do believe that we're building this to basically leave behind
Mm,
for next generations to support what we're doing. One of the interesting points in my research is the farming community, for instance, in the United States is really having some challenges.
I was going to ask, that was going to be my very next question of the pressure of farmers right now and kind of their, I mean, it's in a disarray of what's the mood that you're seeing?
Well, some of the sort of the macro conditions are disturbing. One of the things is not only in the United States, but certainly through the EU, the European Union, is we have an aging farming population.
Yeah.
I think the average age of a farmer in the United States is about 57, 58 years old. It's a little older even in Europe. And what you have is 95% of of our food stock within the United States comes through small family farms. It's not the big guys. It's actually the big guys buy from the small family farm. And what we're seeing is that these farms are multi-generational. It might be second generation, third generation, fourth generation. And you have the current generation in certain respects not opting to take on the family farm.
Yeah.
And so you're having this dearth of farming activity, and this is impacting the rural community. If the other observation is, if you think about, and I'm wearing the banker's hat again, think about what happened in the 2007, 2009 timeframe.
Yeah.
With the mortgage crisis. We went from something about 8,500 banks in the United States to about 4,000 banks. Well, there was a huge reduction because additional compliance, additional competition, things that had to happen, and most of the banks that closed were rural banks. So there's this absence of banking support in the rural communities, and that's becoming a problem. So you have this dual, sort of a double-edged sword in terms of an aging population that doesn't have the next generation of farmers coming in, and then you have the lack of banking and financial services to provide crop lines of credit and this and that to support the seasonal needs of a farmer. So those are two big issues, and we need the farming community because, as I said, 95% of our food stock comes from these farms.
Right.
And so one of the initiatives we're sort of playing with, while I can play on the fintech side and certainly the ag tech side, agricultural technology, but we're actually looking at putting a program together which is more educational tech. Can we glean from the farming community, the current generation of farmers, can we take that knowledge that they have and pass it to a new generation, a new group of farmers? If you think about the major agricultural schools from University of California at Davis, Texas A&M, Cornell, is that they teach agronomy, they teach plant physiology, they teach biology, maybe chemistry, but they don't teach you how to farm.
Yeah.
Farming knowledge extends from generation to generation, word of mouth. That's like, just pass on the nuances of how to farm correctly, regenerative farming. And so we believe that there's a really interesting opportunity to go into the Gen X, or rather the Gen Y, the millennials and the Gen Zs, who may not want to go, they graduate from school, they may not want to go into law or accounting or banking or consultancy. Why not? And they're all digital natives. They were reared in social media and digital devices and this and that. Can we take the knowledge from these farmers, these multi-generational farmers, aggregate that, curate that, and disseminate it in a technology fashion to introduce a new generation, a digital native generation of farmers, and really make farming a compelling industry?
Almost like an ag specific business accelerator or incubator.
Correct. What you find is, particularly the millennials and the Gen Zs are very eco-conscious. They're
Mm-hmm.
willing to pay a little bit more for, natural foods,
Right.
better, things that are healthy, organic, this and that. And so there's this fundamental, ethos within them that we believe could be really, attracted to going out and living off the land.
Right.
How do you farm? Of course, you have better technologies. You can, we can go into the fourth IR, fourth industrial revolution with, Internet of Things and machine learning and AI and, even virtual and augmented realities to, sort of educate, educating this next generation of farmers. But I think there's a huge opportunity to bring farming to an elevated status,
Hmm.
which it was years and years or centuries
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
Well, let's do it now, but with, the best and the brightest, the students coming out of college that want to do something different than, in fact, it's funny because when you talk about accounting and you talk about law, I think those are industries that are most challenged with AI.
Yeah.
Uh, the white collar jobs, the performance of how to farm. Yeah, it's manual labor, but that's not going to go away. Yeah, you
Right.
can use technology to enable and to inform and become brighter at it, but you still have to live off the land. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to have uh, re, uh, a renaissance of
Yeah,
farming.
that was like, and does it take up? I mean, do you need to have massive amount of land and acreage? My family comes from Kentucky, and we were tobacco farmers, and they didn't have
Sure.
to, to be a supplier. You could be on, 20, 40, 60 acres. It wasn't these 400 acres of, big farm because you could pack a lot in the, in a small
Mhm.
square footage of property. Is hemp like, I don't, from an impact or from a scalability, do you have to have a lot of land to be able to enter into this space?
I would say no. The big question is, while you can grow it, you've got to, whether you're growing 10 acres or 110 acres or 1,010 acres, you have to have someone who's going to buy it at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it goes back to my earlier
The
point,
demand. Yeah.
is grown it is the demand side.
Hmm.
Right now, 80% of the hemp that is used in the United States is coming out of China. It's not even grown domestically.
Okay.
Uh, and so you look at these, vagaries, you look at these, situations, and yeah, we could do it, but you've got, you have certain strains of hemp that
Hmm.
perform differently for fiber, for the herd, for the oils, for the, other aspects of the plant. And China is, is the certainly the biggest producer, the biggest cultivator, but so much of the domestic supply or the feedstock that's used for products within the United States is coming out of China.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that should be replaced. Um, but then it becomes a situation is, will a farmer plant 100 acres if they don't know who's going to buy the product at the
That's
end of
true.
the day? And that's
Yeah.
where they got caught in the crossfires, a handful of years ago.
Hmm. Um, Steve, what were like the top lessons learned that, as you came out of the financial industry and, you know, you built something pretty impactful, and exited there. Are there things that you kind of lessons learned that you're doing differently with this new endeavor?
I, the one thing that's different is the use of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Is that, as I said, I'm a big research junkie, and
Yeah.
have published quite a bit and whatnot. And research takes time. Well, now with different programs, you can accelerate the absorption. You can accelerate the research. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. Um, uh, the other thing, which I've served as a mentor in a number of the incubators and accelerators, and both in the U.S. and abroad. And one of the things that I always tell companies or founders or entrepreneurs is, just like a product that you're defining to go into a marketplace,
Hmm.
a widget, and you got to sell to widget buyers.
Right.
is, you're putting together the feature set, you're putting together the characteristics and the benefits and so on. Is I tell these founders, basically you got to look at the company the same way.
Yeah.
Is very few entrepreneurial endeavors, the entrepreneur wants to go to his grave with that company. They're hoping to build value and then exit at some point in time.
Right.
And so what I share with the founders is, just like a product, you have to think about who out there is going to buy your company. And you have to think about that from the outset, in my view, from a strategic standpoint. Is, and we've done this exercise with Renaissance, is in 3 years out, 5 years out, based on what our game plan is, the acquisition of certain companies, the investment in other companies, the development of technology, infrastructure, this and that, who would be the likely candidate to buy Renaissance, say 5 years out? And if in fact you have that criteria set, you can actually build your company to where you have a better likelihood that it's going to be attractive to a strategic buyer.
Yep.
And so that's the thing, is look at your company as a product, and then who's going to be the buyer of that product at the time you want to potentially exit.
I think that
And
was go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was like, that was some of the best advice I think I got from actually Goldman Sachs, the 10,000 small business that I went through. That was the very first exercise. They were like, figure out what your exit is, whatever that might be. If you want to hand it over to your kids, if you're looking for a buyer, but design it around who you think would buy it or take it over, but also think about like what's the company going to look like? Like, how do you want that? How do you want your company to look like then? Is it, and describe it as detailed as possible. And it was like, I had done growth action plans and, 3-year plans and 5-year plans, but to think of it from that perspective of how many employees am I looking at different locations, or, is it a revenue size, like whatever that is. And then what's the value that I would be, selling, what assets, IP, all that, of what's the actual product that I would be handing over to somebody. And it was, we all struggled with that. It was a good exercise.
Sure, no, it's a great exercise, because if people put together, entrepreneurs and their teams put together projections and strategic plans and this and that. But one of the exercises that or queries that I pose to entrepreneurs is, okay, you want to raise X number of dollars, and this will get you to X millions in revenue over the next 2 years. Well, the exercise is characterize, define it,
paint that picture.
What your company looks like in 5 years.
Right.
Who's doing what? What are the products? Who is the markets? Where are you? What are you going to be doing? Are you going to migrate away from what you're just doing to something bigger, something sideways? What's the vertical? What's the horizontal strategy, or even the orthogonal strategy? But trying to forecast, because if you don't know what you're building towards, you don't know what to build in the meantime.
Exactly.
If you're trying to build a bridge, but you start out building a swing, that becomes a problem.
Right. Well, and also, and to your point, a lot of entrepreneurs come into something and they go, oh, I want to achieve X revenue, and it's just some number that they've grabbed, out of thin air, and it's not, success and what a business, exit looks like is different for everybody. It's, sometimes it's not about X revenue. It could be about, I need to get good margin. I need to have, I want to create generational wealth for my family. Whatever that is, I think just painting that picture and getting that description of what does that, and then kind of work backwards from there. And then you can have what's the next 1 year? What are you doing over the next year to get there? What are you doing over the next 5 years to get there?
Sure.
But yeah, that's
And the exercise one of the other exercises is, yes, you want to exit, you want to find who a would-be buyer could be, but then it also goes, and having been a banker for so long, is companies are valued differently. Certain industries are valued, at multiples of revenue. Others
Right.
are multiples of cash flow. Others are percentages of revenues.
Right.
And so one of the exercises is try to find the space that you can define, that your company can be defined within, to optimize the value upon an exit.
If we a year from now we meet up, what are we celebrating? What's a win?
Let's see. We are celebrating the expanse of Renaissance, both as a U.S. as well as a global entity. We're celebrating, we've positioned ourselves as a thought leader in the space.
Okay.
That we have influence in terms of not just reflecting on policy, but actually setting policy to really advocate and make a movement for what we're pursuing. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating my Italian citizenship. That's something that's been going on for quite some time.
What part of Italy is your family from?
Well, my grandparents on my father's side, my grandmother was from a little town outside of Lucca in Tuscany, and then my grandfather was just outside of Sorrento, down in Campania, down in the south. And they both came across on the boat and
hit Ellis Island.
Met here, and yeah, it's one thing that I should have done some time ago, but and recently the Italian government has changed the citizenship requirements.
Because isn't it like you have to be a family to, like, it's almost impossible to become a citizen, right?
Well, they have citizenship by descent. And so they used to be, you could go back 3, 4, 5 generations. Well, they've moved that up to where you can only go back 2 generations. And so
better get it done.
But I still qualify. I've got to get it done. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are you going to move there, or you just want to just have the dual citizenship?
I've got 2 of my kids in Europe. So having a presence over in Europe is important.
Nice.
And it's, as I said in our dialogue here, is that Europe is actually well ahead of the United States in its use of not only hemp but other plant-based materials. And so in certain respects, it's they're somewhat of a leading indicator as to what can be done. And so why not piggyback? And I've been working with the Italian government, with the Moroccan government, with France and Portugal, and this and that. So there's some big opportunities over there. At the same time, what we're talking about in terms of both hemp and fiber plants, it's all global.
Right. So if you had to define your next chapter with one word, what word is that?
I would say manifestation. So, and what I mean by that is, I've got a team. We've got a lot of companies that we're working with right now. We have great aspirations and probably great perspirations as part of that. But my goal would be, a year out, we can look back and say we've manifested what we set out to do, and this is how it's turned out. So
Which
I think
is
the
demand, right? Like that's the mission, is how do we generate more demand for these products?
It's certainly generating demand, but it's the execution to take advantage of the demand. And so it's actually operating as I sort of frame this, as I frame Renaissance, I view it as really a 21st century company. And because, again, hemp was off the market for many years.
Right.
the industry is still, as I've used the term, sort of cottage-like, very, very small companies,
Yeah.
uh, is can we, you know, we don't have, unlike a lot of other industries, we don't have to break down something to rebuild it. It's not like, but Schumpeter's law of constructive destruction
Right.
or creative destruction. It's actually, we can build a 21st century best practice, high technology inclusion from scratch. We don't have to again break something down before we rebuild it. And so in that respect, we have a lot of flexibility, as I've sort of shared with others, is that I'm sort of limited to my own imagination in terms of what we can do. And literally on a daily, weekly basis, we see new opportunities that
Yeah.
may comport with the bigger vision.
It's like
And
you're
so,
you're its own little incubator for the and accelerator.
yeah, the one term, and I appreciate the term, JJ, sort of call it an industrial incubator,
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
we're looking to stand up, companies either from scratch or companies we acquire, and then expand the reach, expand the product line to where it really is supportive of nature-based solutions,
Yeah.
and then prove it out, show the world that we can actually do much better than using some of these toxic materials, toxic ingredients, plastics, and things that don't have great end of life scenarios. They end up in waterways. They end up in landfills. We can do better, and
Yeah.
that's really and again, it's not about planting a green flag. It's really about, with new science, with advanced science, we can actually do a lot of great stuff,
Right.
and using the tools of the trade that our founding fathers used.
Yeah.
So thereby, we're creating a
To the
renaissance
future.
of old practice.
The back to
That's
future.
right.
One last question there. What's the best piece of advice you would give? I mean, we talked about some other insights but what was the best piece of advice you got as a founder that you've really carried over to your business and has influenced your own decision making?
I guess maybe two things. I was I was advantaged because my dad was a banker too,
Hmm.
and so I've followed his footsteps, and I think having a command of numbers is really important. Understanding, because it goes into margins, it goes into what's what
Everything.
doesn't work. Numbers basically thread. Numbers are the basis of music. Numbers are the basis of engineering. Numbers, so having a grasp of numbers is I think fundamental. There's I've met so many entrepreneurs that they can't read a financial statement, and
Right.
it's tough that how do you measure your performance? Certainly there's ways, non-numerical ways to measure, but numbers basically provide uh, a metric
Yeah.
for how you're doing. And the other thing too is uh, really instill the creative
Hmm.
in, not only in yourself but in the team, and really get people to think outside of the box, and think of, just because something hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right.
uh, it's just stimulate creative thought, creative discussion. I know that a couple of the firms, I think Google did it for a while and whatnot. They would allocate half a day to folks, just go think about next generation opportunities.
Right.
I think that with AI, the interesting thing is with artificial intelligence, is, are we losing our ability to create
Hmm.
inherently, cognitively,
Right.
as
And
opposed to using tools and whatnot. And I think the creative, really to instill and to support the creative thought process is so important, particularly when you're challenged, because you have tools now. And again, I think you can play off your own creative wisdom with tools,
right.
advance that
I,
wisdom even further.
I mean, we're in the
So,
creative industry and media industry, so AI has impacted us. But what my
sure.
philosophy is, AI will never replace really human experience and critical thinking, and I
Mhm.
think that's where, and you'll be able to notice the artificialness of I'll call artificialness of mediocrity, of mediocre thinking.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
so AI is great to, our team has embraced it. We've become more, I think, prompt engineers than anything, and the creativity around that. But to
Mhm.
also, it just amplifies the power of your own experience
Sure.
and brain power versus because there's junk out there. I mean, it is there's junk apps, there's junk AI tools, and there's some that are very good at what they do, but it will all, they're great when the inputs are even better and advanced and
Sure.
challenged, and then the output to go, oh, you've got to have the experienced eye to go, like that's not, I've done this for 30 years. Or I mean, I'm sure if you did a prompt and it came out and you're like, that is not factual, or that just doesn't feel right, you would know to challenge it again, and maybe challenge it again with another prompt to get out really good
Sure.
quality. And the same thing happens with design or with copy and campaigns that we do. But I don't think it's going to replace the human. It's just going to, it squeezes the middle. It makes us faster from an
Yeah.
operation perspective, makes us
Sure.
more integrated. But truly, those that are using it, and know how to use it with the experience that comes with it amplifies. And I
Yeah.
think you'll
And the
you
point,
go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say that, if you look at artificial intelligence programs, they're based on
Mm,
pattern recognition, and that's fine, and they're doing great, and they can decipher things much quicker. But the human ingenuity is different because creativity or that aha moment
mm-hmm.
typically goes outside of a pattern.
Right.
And so that's where human ingenuity,
That's
human
right.
creativity plays a big role.
You,
And will programs, AI programs, get to that point? They're starting to, now you
yeah.
have more intimacy relative to AI programs and sentience and
Right.
whatnot. But the creative wisdom, the creative, aha moments where you connect dots, where this is one of the things my team s- you know, claims that I do pretty well, is to actually connect dots that no one else sees. The
Right.
connection. They may be completely foreign, that dichotomous. They don't seem to make sense, but then when you drill down, you can see the commonality. You can see how one feeds off the other, the synthesis.
Right.
Um, and so I think human creativity is still something that uh, has a leading role.
Yeah.
But can you take it one step further? I remember uh, uh, Yuval Noah Harari. He just did a book called Nexus, which talks about the interplay, in the AI arena. And he did an earlier book called Homo Deus, which is in man, and the synchronicity of man and technology
Right.
together. Do we lose a part of humanity? And this gets into the sort of the metaphysical stuff, but we don't have to go there. Uh, but the creative side is something that not only should we preserve, but we should do um, programs. We should do exercises that really instill the nature of creative thought,
Right.
uh, uh, which I think is great for business opportunities, for mankind, for the betterment of humanity and so on. So I think the creative side is something that we have to support and prosper at.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I've seen a lot in the academic space. They've talked about that of like they've got to teach more of the critical thinking, the creativity, the prompt engineering side of it, and using your brain power for that.
Mhm.
And then also being able to kind of think through I call it the power of curiosity, which is kind of what drives us but you've got to be curious even from the outputs to go, does that make sense? Is that what I know? Is that the reality? And how do I challenge it even further? So I think which I think that's fantastic, because I think we've lost in society the power of curiosity. For many of us, we have been complacent and not ask further questions. We haven't gone deeper, and so I think AI might challenge us to stay relevant in that as a human.
For sure.
I could talk about AI all day long. Well, I know we've spent a lot of time, and I appreciate everything. This conversation, you've kind of opened my mind around the category of hemp and agriculture, and I appreciate that. Where can people get a hold of you and connect with you or learn more about what you're doing? What is the best place?
Well, our website is renaissanceparkcorp.com, and there's a little brief on what we're doing. My email is just my initials, SAC, at renaissanceparkcorp.com. And I use LinkedIn a lot.
You're pretty active, yeah.
Connections and whatnot. But no, I am very receptive to people approaching and reaching out and jibber jabber where we can and see if we can create the next the next opportunity.
It's a renaissance.
So
that's right.
It's a renaissance. That's right.
We're going to amplify it. Very good. I appreciate it. And for everyone listening to us, you can find us on all the podcast platforms. That's a wrap on today's chaos, but the journey doesn't stop here. If you found yourself nodding along, laughing, or maybe even yelling, "Yep, same," at us, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review, a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, and share this great content and help us build a more connected entrepreneurial community. You can also dig deeper into founder resources, tools, and more episodes over at Orange Whip. That's Orange Whip, WIP for work in progress, orangewhip.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay scrappy, and remember, we're all a work in progress. We'll see you again next week.